In the last two episodes, we have already exposed many of the Uniting Church's arguments for decriminalisation as distortions, falsehoods, and deflections of the truth. But they have more, and we'll take them one by one. They claim it's unfair that users caught with small quantities, but still trafficable quantities of drugs, are given criminal penalties by the courts. They willfully ignore that users very often fund their addiction by dealing in small quantities of drugs, which is as much a part of the drug problem as the big dealers are. Law enforcement and the courts are aware of that reality. They further claim that a non-addicted drug user causes no societal problems, so we should keep off their backs. But the reason all drug users have been treated as a part of the problem is that occasional users are responsible for recruiting 3 in every 5 people to drug use, where many will become addicted to those drugs. They are a major part of the addiction problem. The Uniting Church's logic is this: non-dependent users aren't harming anyone, so they should never be penalised for their drug use. This is actually like saying that speeding drivers who flagrantly break the law but just happen to have no accidents should never be penalised for their speeding. But our laws never work that way. And then they forget that there is plenty of harm from occasional drug use itself. 29% of deaths from ecstasy within Australia, most often its occasional use, are from accidents, mostly in a vehicle. So there is more to drugs than just addiction. The Uniting Church is vehemently against our drug court system, which requires a user to enter rehab or treatment or otherwise face a criminal conviction. Go back and review the wisdom of that in our previous episode. It works. Requiring anything of a drug user, they think, is totally unfair. And their claim of unfairness is based on a model of addiction which says that it is something like a physical handicap, like being born with no arms, for instance, which cannot be changed, ignoring the fact that addiction is a psychosocial issue where any user can make the choice to change. We all know someone who has escaped addiction. And the problem with their idea that no expectation of change should be placed on any drug user is that it leads to a quasi-legalization of drugs, where all drugs become as legal as alcohol with no apparent restrictions for their use. This puts drug users in control of Australia's drug policy, rather than the vast majority of Australians who don't want drugs in their society. Then they claim that equity demands that we treat all drug users like anybody else. They want to downplay the harms caused by drugs, harms which are so great and so exceptional that we must have harm reduction programs for users. And if equity is such an important issue, why has the pro-drug lobby complained for so long that illicit drugs, which each have unequal impacts on society, that they have all been equitably made illegal? They should have no problem with it all, given their love for equity as a solution. Then there are their curious claims about Australian attitudes to drugs. They say that because 43% of Australians have tried illicit drugs in the past, that drug use should be just treated as normal. But they forget that this same highly drug literate and experienced society in Australia has turned against drug use, with 96 to 99% of the surveyed Australians, depending on which drug you're talking about, being against the use of heroin, ice, speed, cocaine, and ecstasy, the very drugs they want to decriminalise. I don't think that argument works for them at all. They also say there is strong Australian support for decriminalising all drugs in the 2019 National Survey, where the results show very low support for decriminalise anything other than cannabis. In other words, they're not telling you the truth. It seems that they think strong Australian support for rehab and treatment is a vote for decriminalisation, which it certainly isn't, because our drug courts likewise prioritise those very same things in a criminalised environment. Lastly, the biggest falsehood of them all. They claim no major increases in Portugal's drug use since it decriminalised use of all drugs in 2001. Go back to episode 1 of this series to see the reality. Now, all the evidence for any claims made in this episode can be checked by going to the document shown on the right of this screen, found by following the instructions also on this screen. Next episode, why is it that decriminalisation typically increases drug use, thereby failing as a policy?